Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be major spoilers for the series finale of The Bad Batch in this video, so if you have not seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Alright, so the first thing I have to say is that didn't end the way I thought it would, not at all. And there is absolutely a part of me, a big part of me, that was very pleased and satisfied with the way they did wrap this all up, who really did love this ending and thought it was a great way to end the series. One of my sort of fears going into this finale was, could they actually do that? Could they actually end this in a way that felt like an ending and without leaving too many loose threads hanging about? And for the most part, they did do that. We'll talk more about some of the loose threads in a bit. However here, though yes, I enjoyed it, there was also a part of me that, well, that didn't hate it or anything like that. And I don't know that saying a part of me was disappointed is exactly the right way to put it either. But there is a part of me that wanted something that maybe hit a little harder on an emotional level or wanted something a little more poignant at the end. I mean, I'm not unhappy with a happy ending. Not at all. Happy endings are nice. And that's what I would call this. I would call this a happily ever after ending for The Bad Batch. But I think the Season 2 finale and the death of Tech, I think that hit me way, way harder than anything from this episode did. And let's take a moment to mention or point out that yes, Tech did stay dead. That was a pleasant surprise as well. He wasn't Clone X or anything like that. In fact, nobody we knew was Clone X or any of the Clone Xers. They were just random, experimented upon clones that looked cool in this episode and cool throughout the series. Which is more than okay. I am happy they were nobodies. They didn't need to be somebody to be interesting. Not everything or everyone in Star Wars needs to be someone or something from before, or we'll never truly get anything new. But anyway, again here, I'm not unhappy with the happy ending. I'm not unhappy with this finale at all. But I think I had mentally prepared myself for a different type of ending, and when it didn't happen, I didn't feel the relief I was maybe supposed to feel, that they all made it out and everything was good, but rather I just felt surprised that they all got out and relatively unscathed, not counting Crosshair's hand. And sure, to a degree you could say that it's my own fault, that I had my own thoughts or predictions for the finale which were dead wrong. But another part is, I do like a sort of bittersweet ending when it comes to Star Wars. I think that is the type of ending that just fits very well for this franchise, that there's always a price to be paid for victory. And I really thought at least one member of the Bad Batch would have to pay a price to save Omega. I think that leaves an impact on us, the audience, as well as on Omega herself and who she ultimately becomes. And I do still think we see this character again someday down the road in another show or somewhere. We even had Michelle Ang, the voice of Omega, say in an interview not long ago that this would indeed be a sort of bittersweet ending. And though I suppose you could call the very end of it sort of sad in a way, I don't know that I would call that bittersweet. I'd again call that, and they all lived happily ever after on Pabu before Omega went off to fight for the rebellion when she got a little older. And speaking of that, of living out their lives on Pabu, and what I think I'll do now, or for this review, instead of just kind of recapping everything, is kind of go over the things I liked, the things I maybe didn't like so much, and the things that left me with questions, shall we say. Again, I thought most things were wrapped up fairly well, but there were a few things that left me scratching my head or feel like maybe loose ends in a way. Like, for example, that they did just get to live happily ever after on Pabu, or so that is implied, and that the Empire never came looking for them, or for Omega, despite having found them there once before. And yes, I know we have Tarkin at the end saying to shut down Tantus and to scrap Project Necromancer and to put all the funding towards Project Stardust or the construction of the Death Star. But Hemlock wasn't lying or wrong when he said how important this project personally was to the Emperor. We even know in the time of The Mandalorian that it is still a thing or gets resurrected at some point along the way, if it is even ever fully shut down. We also know it will ultimately succeed, right? We know Palpatine will somehow return in the sequel trilogy. And I think we can safely assume it is because of Project Necromancer, though we still don't know the exact details of Project Necromancer. They were left very vague and mysterious throughout the course of this final season. And I thought for sure when Rampart was looking it all over and finding it oh so very interesting, that we would get something from him to give us some clarity or confirmation about just what exactly it is, that he would make some kind of comment to Nala say about, is it even possible to bring someone back from the dead, or how do you make clones that can take on the life force of another person? I don't know, it didn't need to be quite so on the nose, but I did figure we would get some kind of comment from Rampart about what Palpatine was doing or what Project Necromancer was. Though speaking of him, I did think that was the perfect way to take out Rampart. I was curious what would happen to him, and I really didn't want him to have a change of heart or have a heart of gold the whole time and to turn out to be a good guy and to save the Bad Batch or whatever. I am so glad the guy died a villain, and what they were trying to set up with that very interesting scene last week between Crosshair and Rampart was that he couldn't understand that you could change loyalties. Not that he was necessarily loyal to the Empire, but he was only loyal to himself, whereas Crosshair was now very much loyal to his team and to Omega. But anyway, I'm really not sure why Palpatine himself, no matter what Tarkin may say or want to do, why he was okay with shutting it all down, especially when Omega was the key to success and they, or Palpatine, knew that. He was already aware of that, Hemlock had told him. And yeah, as kind of mentioned a moment ago, talking about the death of Rampart, Nala Se blew up all her research, or all the research the Kaminoans had done about cloning, or everything they knew about cloning. And as far as we know, there aren't a lot of Kaminoan cloners left in the galaxy, thanks to the Empire and what they did back in Season 1 to Topeka City. So that is certainly an issue they would need to overcome, one of their own creation, which feels very fitting. I liked Nala Se getting a kind of revenge for her people in the end. I thought that was really good. However, I'm not so sure Palpatine just lets Omega be, or don't know why the Bad Batch aren't at the top of the Empire's most wanted list after what they did, why they didn't want them found and dealt with or just killed, especially considering it seems they would have been pretty easy to find. Though I suppose we can just assume there is a reason why they were able to hide out and live out their lives on Pabu without the Empire ever coming around to find them. There could be a story there that we are just not seeing. I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it does feel a bit strange that they just lived on Pabu and the Empire never went there for any reason, or to seek out Omega, or to find and deal with the Bad Batch, who had caused them quite a bit of headaches. As for something I really, really liked yet again in this episode, Hemlock. I like that we actually have, or had, an intelligent and very competent and smart Imperial officer or scientist, whatever you want to call him. As I have said many times before, your heroes in a story can only be as heroic as the villain they overcome is competent. And Hemlock is certainly that. And I actually think part of the reason why I was, again, disappointed isn't exactly the right word, but part of the reason I kind of wanted or thought a Bad Batch member would die, at least one of them, was because of Hemlock. I wanted him to be smart enough to get one of them killed, I think. Though yes, he does capture them all and plans to experiment on them and to turn them into Clone Xers, he did not want to kill them, so there is that kind of excuse, I guess. And speaking of that, like I said before, I was fine with the Clone Xers being new characters or random clones, but it is maybe another one of those things where I was curious to know just a little bit more about them, or about what they were or how they were created. Just a few little tidbits would have been nice beyond what we got. It's not a huge deal. You don't need absolutely everything explained all the time, or you just bog your story down with exposition. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one out there who felt like they maybe looked like some sort of precursor to the Knights of Ren, how they all had their own kind of unique looks and weapons. But that should not be the case. They have been delved into quite a bit in the comic books. The Knights of Ren have been in the comics quite a bit. But in Filoni Star Wars, comics are made to be retconned, so who knows what will happen. Alright, and moving on to something I absolutely hated, Scorch's death. Pardon my language here, but he died like a bitch. And though sure, I appreciate them using Delta Squad or acknowledging their existence, they did show up very briefly in the Clone Wars at one point. But I think, I know I would have preferred it be some random clone commando all along instead of Scorch, really doing next to nothing the whole time and then dying like that. What an absolute waste. Though that said, I think what would have been cool or could have worked if you did want to use Delta Squad for more than just kind of being there and looking cool, or just using Scorch really, was scrapping the whole Clone X thing, which, as I just said a moment ago, was very kind of vague anyway. And just having the big final battle here being between the Bad Batch and the Delta Squad after Delta Squad had been built up to be a very serious threat throughout the series instead of, again, using all the Clone Xers. But alas, Scorch just gets wasted like a frickin' stormtrooper in the end, and the rest of them were nowhere to be seen, which is probably a good thing, all things considered. Alright, and back to something I really liked, which is that this episode was around 50 minutes long and did not feel rushed at all, and again, completed the series. That was a pleasant surprise or offered a sigh of relief, though honestly, I wish or would have preferred or would prefer going forward out of Star Wars animated shows, I would prefer longer runtimes and fewer episodes. Give me a 12-episode season of 35 to 40-minute episodes, or even a little shorter if need be, but somewhere in that ballpark, over getting longer seasons and getting barely 20-minute episodes from time to time like we have the last few weeks until this week. Basically do what X-Men 97 is doing. Something else I really liked or appreciated, once again, was just how good this all looked and sounded. And by sounded, I mean everything from the amazing work of D. Bradley Baker voicing all the clones, he is phenomenal, to all the other voice actors doing a terrific job, to the score of Kevin Kiner and all the sound effects and everything else that just goes into making this sound like Star Wars. And the visuals oftentimes are breathtaking and better than the live action stuff. Seeing our first Star Destroyer there at the end was also a very nice touch. I know I say this all the time, but I do wish more people gave the animated Star Wars stuff a chance because in some ways it's actually better than the live action stuff, especially the live action shows on Disney+. Moving on, one thing I was maybe a little disappointed over was no Rex, especially given the name of the episode, The Cavalry Has Arrived, and I thought for sure we would see him and he would be the Cavalry, or all the other clones that come with him would be the Cavalry. We would have this much bigger sort of final battle. Now, sure, the fight we did get, or all the action in this episode, was still very, very good, don't get me wrong, and the series is indeed called The Bad Batch, not Rex's Adventures. And it did focus on ending their story, the story of the Bad Batch, so it's not a huge complaint that we didn't get more Rex. We do know where he ends up eventually, so it wouldn't have had any tension or added tension to bring him into the mix. Not that they were going to kill any clones off anyway, other than all the random clones that Omega really wanted to free. Seemed like a lot of them got killed. But anyway, overall, I do wish we would have seen or gotten a little more big picture clone army stuff in this series, or at the end here, because especially in season 2, we did get quite a bit of that, or set up for something more, I thought. I think that season implied we were doing a bit more with the clones. The second season implied we were going to do a bit more big picture stuff with the clones, and they ultimately really didn't do anything with that this season, or explaining what ultimately becomes of most of the clones. That is still a pretty big question mark in Star Wars lore, if you will. And speaking of things that maybe didn't quite pay off in the end, that Ventress episode feels more unnecessary than ever right now. Not that I expected her to be the Cavalry either, or to show up in the final battle or anything of the sort. I'm glad she didn't. That really wouldn't have made any sense. It would have been strange. But I really thought she might tie into something at the very end somehow, or what exactly was the point of bringing her back at all? And yeah, there is still a good chance, a really good chance, if not a 100% chance, that we will see her again elsewhere, that we'll see Ventress again. It could be that she will be a big part of the next animated show, just like, as I've pointed out before, how the Bad Batch showed up in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, and then they got their own series. But anyway, not worrying or dwelling on that right now. The whole Asajj thing will work itself out in time. Like I said, I'm sure we'll see her again. I think, like the very end with Hunter and Omega going off to join the rebellion, I am a little surprised, or a lot surprised, we didn't see her say goodbye to all of them, especially Crosshair, who I found interesting. She hugged first upon being rescued on the bridge from Hemlock. She ran to him, hugged him first, which is because they built those two up this season, that relationship between Omega and Crosshair, and they did it so much so that it felt very odd not to see them say goodbye in the end. I don't know, I get if you're going to pick one of the Bad Batchers to have her say goodbye to, I get why it was Hunter, but I don't get why it wasn't Crosshair, if that makes sense. Or again, why not just have all of them there to say goodbye to her? Maybe they thought it would drag out too long or something, I don't know. Like we'd get some kind of Return of the King ending that just kept going and going. Either way, a little surprised by that decision. As I'm still surprised by the decision not to kill any of the Bad Batchers. It just felt, I don't know, maybe it just felt like it was a little too easy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it's not sitting well with me that none of them died. Makes me sound like a terrible person. And I know some out there probably absolutely love that none of them died, and that's fine. Again, it's not like I'm really that upset or anything. I just think it hits a different emotional level if you lose somebody, and when it ended, when they all got away, I just felt like, oh, that was it? They all get to go home? Which is, again, that's a really nice ending, actually. It's nice to think, or great to think, that these good soldiers who once followed orders, or didn't follow orders, you know what I mean, but they all, other than Tech, got to live through this horrible experience. Not only this war that they were created for, literally created for, but they lived through everything that came after as they tried to figure out a new place and purpose in the galaxy beyond just fighting a war or fighting battles. That they got to choose how they lived out the rest of their lives is a really cool ending in a way. And as I keep trying to say, I do love happy endings. Don't get me wrong here. I wish all of us here in the real world could be so lucky, but life rarely has such, shall we say, clean, happy endings, and I've always appreciated how Star Wars, though a fantasy space opera, it can keep itself sort of grounded and deliver endings that stick with you because they do have that bittersweet element to them, which is how life usually goes. And though, yes, it was a great, enjoyable episode that did many things right, more than I even pointed out here, and it was a pleasant way to end the series, I just don't think this ending sticks with me, if you will. I do think something was missing here, and maybe it wasn't just that no one died, but maybe it was something else that is kind of missing. I don't know. But either way, it does not ruin how much I enjoyed the series overall and how much I really enjoyed this final season. They did a lot of things right in this final season, and it's one of the main reasons I am indeed looking forward to whatever animated show we get next. Well, I think that's going to be all I have for you this time. And I know there are probably 101 things I didn't mention, but I will be doing a Let's Talk Some Bad Batch video over on my other channel, where we will be responding to comments left on this video. So if there is something you think I missed, mention it in the comments below and maybe we'll talk about it over there. Either way, do leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.